When you hear the phrase military toxic exposure, you're probably thinking of burn pits or Agent Orange or even maybe Camp Lejeune. And those are definitely the big ones. But what about the other stuff that nobody warned us about? The things that we touched and breathed and worked with every single day. Stuff that we just never even thought of as being an exposure. Now, I'm willing to bet that before this video is over, at least one of these is going to make you think, yeah, I remember that. Now, the point of this video is to help you possibly find a link to what might be causing some of the health issues that you may be having, especially long after you served. I mean, if you've had any weird, odd, or medical issues that you or your doctor cannot explain, then these exposures may be the link that you're looking for. And make sure you stick around, as later, I'm going to show you something that the VA and Department of Defense built specifically to help track these exposures. Now, if you've spent much time around military vehicles or equipment, you probably remember where they were maintained and repaired, the Motorpool. And here, you probably had some exposure to things like solvents and oils and other various fluids, not to mention all that vehicle exhaust. And depending on your MOS, you might have been around this stuff every single day for years. So let's begin with CARC paint. Now, CARC stands for Chemical Agent Resistant Coating, and it was used extensively on military vehicles and equipment. Now, CARC is known to be safe when it's cured. However, when it's in a liquid or aerosol state, it can be known to be hazardous. Also, the dust generated from sanding it can be dangerous as well. Now, I know there was a lot of sanding and painting going on when we were getting ready to go to Desert Storm. Of course, not our vehicles. We took our force-painted Hummers right to the desert. Let's just say we stuck out like a sore thumb. Anyway, if you painted anything with it or sanded it or even worked nearby while someone else was doing the work, then this is something you need to take note of. I mean, did we always have good ventilation and respiratory protection? Pfft, come on. Most of us at the time were just trying to get our jobs done. And here's something else that a lot of us should remember from the Motorpool. That old parts washer. If you ever used a parts washer, you probably remember that smell. I know I do. The parts went in dirty and came out clean. And usually, our bare hands went in there too. No mask and safety goggles either. Now, of note, the VA specifically recognizes industrial solvents as a potential military occupational hazard. But here's the problem that we face 30 or 40 years later. Do you remember what chemical was actually in that solvent tank? I know I don't. I remember using it, and yes, I remember the smell, but the actual chemical in there, I have no idea. And that right there is part of the problem that we face today. We're trying to reconstruct an exposure history decades later, and we basically have no clue of what was in there in the first place. So next we have fuels. I mean, we dealt with diesel and gasoline, JP4, 5, and 8. We got the fuel on our hands and on our uniforms. We constantly breathed in the fumes. And for a lot of us, again, this was just part of the normal environment. And that is pretty much the point of this video. When you start thinking about all of your military exposures, don't just think about the exposures that made the news. Think about what actually you were exposed to every single day. Now, not every exposure came from the Motorpool. Some chemicals were intentionally used on things all around us. Pesticides and insect repellents are really good examples of this. We use them on our uniforms and tents and equipment and around our living areas. Now, that doesn't automatically mean that any of those products harmed you. In many cases, they were there to protect us from insects and disease. But they're still part of the bigger picture. Think back. Do you remember what those pesticides contained? How often were you around it? Did you apply it to yourself, or was it applied ahead of time? Now, here's one exposure that I think gets overlooked quite often. What about the installation you were stationed at? A lot of us spent years in old barracks and hangars, warehouses, maintenance buildings, boiler rooms, and a lot of other facilities that were there long before we ever showed up. And some military installations have been investigated over the years for contaminations that may involve solvents and petroleum products, as well as a host of other potentially harmful things. Things like mold and lead and asbestos. Now, the VA recognizes such exposures as asbestos and lead as potential military occupational hazards. Now, finding contamination somewhere on a base doesn't automatically mean that everybody that was ever stationed there was exposed. I mean, where and when it was matters. And whether there was actually a way for you to come in contact with whatever that contaminant was matters. So here's a question to ask yourself. Was the installation where I served ever investigated for any contaminations? Who knows? So now let's talk about water. If you were in the Army like I was, you probably remember the old water buffalo. Now, I'm sure they were also used in the other branches as well. Now, I'm not saying the water buffalo itself was toxic, but think about it. Where did that water come from? How or was the water even treated? How was the buffalo cleaned? And how long has the water even been sitting there? And of course, the buffalo was painted in CARC paint. But at the time, we just filled our canteens and our water cans and, well, we drank it. So now at this point, we've got a good list of potential exposures here. We've got CARC paint and solvents and fuels and buildings and pesticides and water, probably a lot of other things that I haven't mentioned here. So how are we supposed to remember all this decades later? Well, earlier in this video, I told you about something that the VA and Department of Defense built to hopefully help all of this. It's called ILER, I-L-E-R, the Individual Longitudinal Exposure Record. ILER was designed to pull together known documented exposure information from your military service. This can include information connected to your training, your deployments, your duty assignments, and known exposure events. And according to my research, as of March 2026, current active service members can log in and access their own ILER exposure information online. On there, they can add any self-reported exposure information if they believe that something was missing. Now, when they do that, it doesn't automatically turn a self-reported event into a verified exposure. It's just going to be identified as self-reported information and become part of their record. Now, ILER isn't going to contain a perfect record of everything that we ever touched or breathed. I mean, let's face it, how can it? If you clean parts without solvent in 1988, there's probably not going to be an entry telling you what was in that tank on that Tuesday afternoon. But the fact that ILER exists tells us something that's very important. It tells us our health history isn't just limited to what happens in the clinics anymore. So what about us veterans? Can we use ILER? Well, at the time of this recording, veterans do not have access to the ILER system the same way that current service members do. At least not yet. The VA is expected to begin offering veterans access to the system sometime in the fall of 2026. If and when that happens, I think it's something that we're probably going to want to take a close look at. So what should you do with all this information? Well, first, I'm not telling you you need to go out and start filing disability claims for every chemical or other exposure that you remember. I mean, exposure itself isn't a disability, and it doesn't automatically establish any service connection. But I do think it's worth sitting down and thinking about your military service and the things that you may have been exposed to. And it's not just where did I deploy, but what did I actually do day in and day out? What stuff did I work with? What did I breathe? What got on my skin? And what kind of buildings did I live and work in? Also, make sure you talk to the people that you served with. And I think this is something that can be very important to you. You yourself may not remember what was in that solvent tank, but someone at your old unit just might. Someone also may remember painting equipment or maybe a chemical spill. Maybe they remember a building problem or water issue. You never know. The more I looked into this subject, the more I realized we've probably only scratched the surface here. There's probably a lot of things that I haven't even thought about yet. And that's where I'd like your help. Think back to your own service. Were you possibly exposed to things in your job that no one seemed to be concerned about at the time? Put it in the comments below. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of stuff out there. I'm the Humble Veteran. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.